Let's talk for a minute about how good we really are at communicating at Suzuki. And let me paint a little picture for you. When you think about it, there's all types of communications, right? There's grapevine communications, there's formal communications, there's small group, there's parent communications. There's different communication styles. We may have a different way that we choose to communicate. Some of us may be very open communicators, some of us may be more reserved communicators, some of us may be direct. In the South, it seems like many people are indirect, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which if you're from the North, you're not used to. The other thing is thinking styles are different. And this is something I've learned on the support team, is some of us are very logical thinkers. Deborah, for example, is a spatial thinker, so she pulls data from all sorts of places and eventually synthesizes it together. Does that affect how you communicate? Absolutely, right? Then the final piece I would say is, I've had many times teachers say we communicate well on the team. And when I dig down deep, what they're really saying is their daily meetings and their business exchanges and their pleasantries are fine. What's the part of the communication they're not doing well, Adrian?
They're not asking the right questions, and they don't have the same understanding of what's being said. They interpret it differently.
How are they usually in their communications on messy conversations? Often poor.
Yes, and
How
dealing
are-
with the real important issues that need to
Right.
come out.
We're all great at passing on pleasantries, aren't we?
Yeah.
But when it comes to conflict, when it comes to planning, communication skills are usually what? Not very good.
Right, right.
Right. Why is that?
Because you don't want to cause conflict.
Yeah.
Why?
Because
what
somehow
are we taught from birth?
we're taught that conflict is bad. That you follow the path of least resistance. That's the easiest thing to do.
Get along.
You don't question. You don't. So in a meeting, when you don't truly understand what's going on, you may not ask those questions in an attempt to get along. You don't want the person who's presenting the information to feel like, you're questioning that information, although you should question that information. But because we look at everything from an emotional, personal standpoint, I don't want my team member to feel like I'm not on their side or I'm not supportive of them. So I don't question them.
Or I wanna be
Even though I
liked.
understand-
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I just want to get along.
Right, no snitching.
I think
Right.
also sometimes something will happen, a conflict will come up, but then it'll kind of resolve itself. So it's easier to not discuss it, where discussing it could probably be a good thing.
How many of you, before you came to Suzuki, had any in-depth training in conflict resolution? Any of you? You've had some? But most, because you're
Most people,
counseling,
yeah.
Most of
Most
us
people
are
don't.
taught from birth to avoid conflict.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Most
At
definitely,
all
most
costs.
definitely.
And how many of you ever taken a change management class? You have, what figures?
Yeah.
Yeah, but so all this stuff we have to communicate
Right.
about, we have no training in
None,
school.
None.
Right.
Yeah.
And you
None.
also think that you've been getting along just fine all this time without it. So why do I have to do it now?
Right.
So not just resisting the change, but you're resisting the change that's required to get to change.
Right.
So it's like, I spent my whole life and I got along just fine.
Right,
So
right.
why do I have to do this now?
Culturally, being a good Southern boy, you smile and nod.
Exactly.
You, and in your head you think, "There's no way I'm going to do that."
Or you
I
stuff
don't
it
believe.
and it comes out
I
some
don't
other
believe
way.
in that, or yeah, she doesn't know what she's talking about. I'm just smiling and
Right.
nod.
The
Right.
cultural diversity at this school,
Yeah.
when it comes to the collaboration within the teams, there's huge variations
Yeah.
on
Sure.
how communication is given and received. And I can just speak from our team. We've had situations before where a message was so taken, completely out of left field, and it took so long to make that discovery that there was so much that was lost. So
'Cause
many
you have language
months.
barriers
we
in your
have,
room.
We have language barriers in our room, and there were perceptions and fears that were completely unfounded, that were completely off topic.
Yeah.
But because that teacher didn't have a voice, and we made assumptions that our communication was being understood because she was doing the smile and nod.
Yeah.
The trickier
It
ones,
was
though, I
hard.
mean, language barriers, you kind of know, is she not, is she he or she not
Right.
understanding? To me, the harder ones are the cultural norms.
Absolutely.
If you come from an Asian country or an Eastern European country, you're not allowed to speak up.
Right.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And by the same token, if you come from a culture that honors direct, which in America, an American culture, and I say American culture, but
Northern American.
Northern American culture,
Yeah.
Southern American culture, that sounds like you're being rude.
Right?
Yeah.
To be direct and for me to say to you, Paula, you know what? I really don't like that shirt.
Neither do I.
It's not personal, but
Right.
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
from a culture that accepts just straightforward truth,
Communication.
then
Yeah.
the other people are like, did you hear her? She was just horrible. She was rude. And so that becomes something that it was never intended
Yeah.
to be.
Yeah.
Right.
I had that experience when I first started here.
Right.
Because in the space that I was in, there was an individual whose cultural background was very to the point, direct, and that was interpreted as being rude and being mean and aggressive. And so that developed a whole bunch of stuff that it was never intended to be.
Right. Communications is very tough, and I would say it is a skill we all have to work at every day in Suzuki. Not nearly as much as some other organizations I've been at.
And the question asking is so important. For the language barrier, do you really understand? For the cultural issues, is that really what you meant?
But to ask good questions, you better be really good at listening.
Yeah.
And you're not just listening to the words, what else are you listening
You're
to?
listening to the body, you're looking at the
Tone,
eyes, you're looking
emphasis.
at tone and emphasis, absolutely.
Are they shaking their foot?
Yeah.
Right?
Or are they
Yeah.
diverting their eyes? Or do they just want to get out of this conversation that they're having with you?
Have they pulled their chair back?
Have they folded their arms?
Right.
Right.
Yeah, and as we work with people, you start to learn their patterns of nonverbal communication.
Right. And what I've seen is we all are aware of nonverbal communications. Not all of us choose to use the cues to continue a dialogue,
Yeah.
right? And in fact, in the evaluator, one of the things the consultant had me add in is, how did she word it? When we respond to how someone is communicating and validate what they're saying and doing. So part of it being an effective communicator, if I see that you continue to look at the clock and you're looking at the ground all the time, I ask you, hey, what's going on? Right? I don't just ignore that cue you're giving me.
Right.
Most of us aren't trained to do that, are we? Right. Okay, thank you.